Finally, sir, I also want to ask you about now as India goes on to the high table. There are international disputes which are going to happen, Indian businesses which are going to go the wrong way, right way. All this is going to happen. There's going to be interlapping of cases which are going to happen internationally and nationally. How do you see this panning out in the next couple of years?
Well, our judges apply our law, right? So Indian judges, when they decide cases, apply the parameters of the law which is enacted by Parliament and by our state legislatures. We apply international conventions to which India is a party in interstices, as we say, to explain provisions of our law so as to bring them into a manner which is consistent with our international obligations. So, for instance, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women or the Convention on Child Rights. We use these conventions to which India is a party to give better expression to yardsticks and parameters which are contained in our own law. But ultimately, the function of every judge in India is to apply our law. We cannot decide a case on a principle of international law or a principle of law in another country in supersession of our law. But there's again a nuance in that.
Exactly. That's what I was saying.
In arbitration law, for instance, arbitration law, parties can decide upon the seat of the arbitration and they can decide on the choice of law.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, an arbitration dispute, say, between an Indian company and a Venezuelan company or an Indian company and a South African company may yet decide that the venue of the the seat of the arbitration would be Singapore, but that the substantive law which will apply would be UK law. And in which case you would apply the law which parties have chosen. But that's in the context of, purely a commercial dispute, such as arbitration.
Reason I also bring this is because of the American system. Like now this whole Adani issue which is happening. And Mr. Kamal Sibal, he tweeted the other day and he said it's sheer high-handedness, abuse of US power. If the US has information on acts of bribery, they should move the Indian legal system. The indictment is against the Indian national for committing acts on Indian soil. If that is the case, extraterritorial jurisdiction claimed by the US violates the sovereignty of other countries, because it's talking about taking action in India against Mr. Adani. So then now this whole thing is going to happen, where judgments are passed on Indian nationals for having given bribes in India, supposedly having given or allegedly having given bribes in India. This overlapping, explain that to a layperson like me.
Look, I wouldn't like to speak about any particular case because though I have ceased to be a judge, my discipline of having a record and papers of a case before I has had an opinion has still not gone out of my life.
Okay.
So I shouldn't be speaking something merely on my reading of what has happened in the newspapers or what has happened on the electronic media. So I would not speak on a particular case.
But you did speak on the Hindenburg report.
Because that was a case specifically which came up before the Supreme Court. But the principle of law which every Indian judge follows is that when we decide cases which come up before us, either on the criminal side, the civil side, the commercial side, the constitutional side, is that we apply provisions of our law. There are exceptions, which I said, when we are mandated to apply a law other than our law. And I gave you that example where in the case of an arbitration dispute between two parties, parties have agreed that the choice of law would not be Indian law, but the choice of law would be, say, UK law. In which case a judge would apply and see whether the standard of that particular law is fulfilled or otherwise. Okay. But otherwise, as Indian judges go, we are duty-bound to answer cases in terms of the law which governs our jurisdiction. Okay. And what governs our jurisdiction is a law which is enacted by our parliament and by our state legislatures.
Click here to watch the full episode.